The next session is going to be chaired by Vanessa Bakewell from Meta. But it features two more amazing women, Dawn Paine and Valerie Bounds. Now, Valerie told me not to say this, but she was once dubbed one of the most creative women in the UK, so no pressure there, Valerie, wherever you are. So, are they not here? Keep talking. So apparently I've got to keep talking because they're getting their headsets fitted. So just so you know. But I hope you got something from that session. I mean, some key words for me there, or key things, key takeaways for me were, choose the right platform, for you. Don't be pressured into making those decisions just because everyone else is doing it. Explore, ask questions. And I think the most important thing for me was that, we can use AI to poop Madonna. I don't know whether anyone else got that, but I wrote it down. Hurry up, guys, because I'm running out of words. Here they are, look, here they are. How professional am I? There you go, there you go.
Just get mic'd up. I'll introduce myself. So thanks everyone for coming today. I'm Vanessa, so I work at Meta and I've been there for about 10 years now, working across Facebook and Instagram. Oh, the mic's not working. Mic's not on. Is it? Yeah, it's on now. Okay. I've worked at Meta for 10 years on Facebook and Instagram, and then previous to that worked at Google and YouTube, which is where I met Dawn, who is my client, when Dawn was CMO of Nintendo. And then later on, Dawn was also my client when I was working at Facebook and Instagram. So we've known each other for about 15 years. And then I got to meet Valerie recently, which is amazing as well. And I love what you've done in terms of setting up the business here in Merseyside. And of course, Dawn, you've worked, and both of you have worked nationally, globally, and have set up here in Merseyside. And I think there's so much to learn from your experience. I wanted to, obviously I've introduced you a little bit, but I'd love to hear about both of your individual careers to date and then how you ended up setting up Aurora.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Mm-hmm. Go on.
Hello, I'm Valerie. Finally got my mic on. I've been working in digital for about 25 years now. So I started way back in the days where you basically had to convince someone that they needed a website. So things have moved on quite substantially since then, and now we're having the parallels with talking about trying to convince people that they might want to try working with an NFT or think about metaverse strategy. So and over that time I've worked at a whole host of different kind of agencies and businesses. I started off in London working for sort of WPP agencies, and then for some smaller digital creative agencies as well. And in that time, I've worked for quite a lot of music-related brands, from Universal Music Group to the British Council Music. I used to work at an agency called Music, who are super cool, actually. They're over in Manchester, and they work some amazing projects. And at the time, we worked with the Brit Awards, at the time when the Brits weren't very cool. And we did a bit of rebranding with them, and that was the point at which they started. We're going to talk about collaboration. We started talking about how they were really British. They should be proud to be British, and they should really build on the British creative industry. So collaboration between the Brit Awards and designers and artists. So the first kind of foray into that was working with Vivienne Westwood to redesign the Brit Award, and then that turned into
designer does it every year.
Exactly. Yep. So that went from there. So that was really, really exciting at the time as well. Universal Music Group were seen as a bit of a megalith, and I remember them. We were talking to them. I'm sure a lot of you have worked with them and had contact with them. But this amazing building in South Kensington, full of 7 record labels, all filled with amazing people who love their music, but from the outside viewed as a bit of a corporate monster. And so they wanted to bring through their kind of personality and the humanity of and the passion of the people that work there into their brand. So we got to work on the rebrand of them and redo their website at the time, and then worked on various kind of projects with them. And over the years, like I say, worked on lots of kind of entertainment brands. More recently, started Aurora with Dawn, who will tell you about her amazing background in a minute. But we've got a music client in the form of the Official Charts company, and we've been doing some lovely work with them, which we'll tell you a bit more about. So yeah, and I've got a deep passion for kind of music myself as well. So yeah.
Dawn, over to you.
So Val is definitely more the muso out of the pair of us, and Mrs. Gaming, Film and TV. So I guess another interesting bit in mine and Val's stories is that from the Northwest, Liverpool, kind of had to do the moving to London bit for our careers, but then both moved back here and are super excited about kind of, doing loads here.
We can come on to that later, but it'd be interesting to hear, like, do you still need to do that post-COVID? But anyway, we can come on to that.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. So kind of gaming, popular culture, kind of film and TV has always been what's got me super excited. And so kind of my career, kind of prior to Nintendo actually, playing games, early 80s, ZX Spectrum. Val and I, pair of complete nerds, which I think was what kind of brought us together. And we continue to discover our nerdiness as we go. It's like untapped and unending. And then kind of worked here in Liverpool at Signosis, as was back in the day, which was the 2-year period of my life when I was even remotely cool, in the kind of mid to late 90s. Worked at Atari for a little bit in a kind of global role, which was quite interesting. But then career love affair was just Nintendo, which is just impossible to kind of really outline in a short period of time. 10 years there, loved it. Market transformation, got to work with Satoru Iwata directly, and did really bonkers things with an incredible group of people. We shifted our market share from 5 to 80% in 12 months, which is just insane if you think about it. So, and really for me, that kind of taught me how to be incredibly entrepreneurial. And I think that then really, that ability to take calculated risks, do things that haven't been done before, was really kind of brought to the fore in me. Then worked at Universal Pictures, where, with the greatest respect, I didn't feel the same innovation vibes going on, but was still really interesting.
Yeah, Hollywood is a different beast.
Yeah, a little bit more cookie cutter, but we'll come on to talk about kind of, I guess, film marketing a little bit. But inexorably, I was wanting to move back up to the north, got the opportunity to do that, coming back up here to work with Creative England and kind of build out their Manchester office. And that kind of really got me into working directly again at source with kind of creators, entrepreneurs, digital and kind of creative industries. Spent a bit of time back in Liverpool kind of working with a whole bunch of different kind of scale-ups, which is cool. And then kind of really, Val and I kind of met each other kind of not long before COVID, actually. And then started to build Aurora. So should I tell you a bit about the craziness which has been that?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I'd love to hear, like, what the biggest surprise has been of setting up the company. Obviously, there's a lot of learnings of kind of working here on Merseyside, but then also I think you've talked about how there's a big opportunity to have worked, remotely with different talent all over the world. But yeah, I'd love to hear more.
So, I mean, it's definitely one for the book. Which is building a business from scratch in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic, which has been quite interesting. But as you will well know, I'm a massive believer in the notion of necessity as the mother of invention. Yeah. So, and often, obviously, when massive moments like this happen is when the biggest innovation can be born out of it as well. So, of course, as horrifying as this whole experience has been over the last couple of years, I think Val and I actually, real meeting of minds, such a kind of complementary point of view on life and business and everything, really. We saw a kind of a gap in the market, really, for a different type of agency. And really that was informed by my background being one of 20-odd years CMO side, having worked with a myriad of different types of creative and digital agencies, good, bad, and ugly. Val then, with obviously her incredible background, kind of leading digital teams from an agency point of view, meshing those two things together to really kind of bring together a different type of agency, which is unencumbered by bureaucracy, we were born virtually, we're now hybrid, and hilariously, we've kind of grown the business over the last kind of really just over a year, 18 months or so, properly. Every pitch we've won has been virtual, apart from one, which we've just won as a physical meeting.
Which was more kind of high pressure.
I didn't do the physical one. That was probably quite stressful, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's very different.
Yeah.
I think if a virtual meeting, all right, it's going to start here, and it's going to end here.
Yeah.
And it's quite good actually, because sometimes we were doing 3 pitches in a week, which we would never have done when we were doing
traveling.
Yeah, and just people wanted to kind of meet more quickly, which had the pressures in itself, because you had to prepare for that, right? And normally you have a bit longer to think it through, but then there was no procrastination. You were straight in there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the physical meeting was just interesting again, because there's a whole different dynamic when you're in the room with people, isn't there?
Yeah, you're doing all that reading, the body language when you're in person.
It's all of that, I know. So I think that we've been really kind of, at that classic combination of kind of, hopefully, good amount of expertise, experience, a little bit of, luck in terms of, the sectors that obviously we play most strongly, entertainment, technology, gaming, were obviously the sectors that weren't just surviving but thriving during COVID. So again, with all of that kind of, we're a startup with a leadership team with, over 40 years experience, and all of our contacts and relationships, we were able to kind of bring all of that to bear. So, here we are now, kind of 18 months down the line, really. So we're working with Lego Ventures, we're working with global fashion brands, we're working with global games companies, and we're super passionate about working with Liverpool-based kind of clients as well. It's not like, hey, it's all about international, deeply passionate about working in the city. We work with a couple of charities here in the city as well, and do quite a lot of pro bono work as well. So, and to your question, I guess, around what's been the surprising bit, and kind of really positive, actually, I think has been obviously that outcome from COVID, which is that democratization of people not caring so much where you're based. Yeah. So it's enabled us to grow really quickly, compete with and beat out much, much bigger global agencies as being a Liverpool-based agency. So I think it's that, we're so excited about being passionate about where we're from, but playing on that kind of international stage has been delightful, really, to kind of experience.
And congrats as well. Obviously, it's a massive journey to go on in a pandemic. But I think a lot of what we've talked about today and in the first panel, and I think a lot of what we'll talk to is, I think when it comes to convergence, which is all of these industries kind of colliding, and certainly music creates a halo effect for all other industries. So everyone's kind of eager to work with music and vice versa. Collaboration is key. So whether it's in person or whether it's virtual, I think collaboration and people who are collaborative and have that really good attitude and open mindset, tend to do the best work. Who has been your best collaborators and why to date while you set up in Merseyside?
I take this.
Yeah.
Yep. So, well, our model is very much, when we started, we didn't have a big team. We've grown quite a good team now. And so our whole thing was, we want to bring in experts, and we can tap into global expertise now because we're not limited. We actually have one of our teams actually in Toronto. So that was a big collaborative, and he's been with us from the start as well. And he's actually working with a load of our clients that are Europe-based, and that hasn't been a problem at all. That's been brilliant. So in terms of our own team and our collaboration, and then another piece was bringing in experts that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be, working for a creative agency. And so we kind of coined the phrase creative experience agency because we want to go beyond that. And so it was about bringing in, futurists, musicians, DJs, interesting kind of minds that add to the mix and can layer on some new thinking into, beyond the average kind of what you'd expect in a kind of brand strategy team, for example.
Like Duncan, the ex-editor of Mixmag.
Well, I was going to mention Duncan, who you introduced us to.
Like
and
journalists. It's like amazing, isn't it? All of these people that you can work with.
Exactly that. So we've brought in people like that. And Duncan is a great example because he worked with us on the Official Chart Company, but he's worked with us on a number of other projects where he's got this incredible background, this ability to tell stories and write from a storytelling perspective, where he's got a different skill set to, say, a brand copywriter, or which equally would need. But we wanted him to come in and write long form content for us and think about things in a different way, and he totally brought that in. And then, like I say, we've brought in other people, and then more recently we've been working on some really cool kind of projects where I've particularly needed to collaborate, and just kind of thinking back to the previous panel, all these new technologies, I've needed to bring in really good expertise, because we've got a couture client who's saying, I want to do an amazing NFT of this couture dress. And, there's only a few kind of places you would go at the moment who can really understand how to create that level of quality and that detail. And so you're working with platforms like DressX, who really understand how to produce that, and actually to produce it quite quickly, and to produce it in a cost-effective way, because a lot of this involves heavy investment up front, and there's not much of a return at the moment. Again, harking back to the previous panel. So that collaboration's been really important to us, learning expertise. Another one is, how do you then get that out there and market it to a very immature market? So we've been talking, quite extensively, working with Metaverse Group, who ran the first digital fashion week in the Web3 Metaverse Fashion Week in Decentraland. So we've made those kind of connections. And then alongside that, working with Snap, who are then thinking about, well, take that digital fashion a step further. And how do we activate that? So you get this network of experts who are all absolutely brilliant at what they do.
Amazing. I was going to say, I think Jane mentioned that NFTs, and obviously we can't be skilled on everything. Can I admit I'm not? And Sophie obviously talked on the first panel about, again, just not being able to be across everything. And NFTs have recently been announced to be part of the official charts. And of course, you've worked with Lauren, who's also from Merseyside, who works leading marketing at the Official Charts Company. Tell us about your work with the Official Charts Company, and can you tell us about NFTs so that we can walk away understanding a little bit more today?
I'll talk a little bit about what we've been up to with the Official Charts, and Val can definitely take the floor with NFTs. She's the reigning queen of NFTs. So I think with the Official Charts, I mean, that's been kind of... it's been a really interesting brief with them, actually. So I think, like many legacy brands, obviously it's their 70th anniversary this year. So, with dare I say, legacy brands, I think often it's that kind of requirement to be able to, how do you kind of stay relevant? How do you engage with Gen Z audiences? So it was really interesting, quite thoughtful piece of kind of research and insight work that we did with them, really. And again, it's that classic thing where I think the client thought it was one problem when actually the problem was slightly different. The brief in itself was what relevance might the charts have, the official charts have, to Gen Zs. But obviously, and many people in the room will know this, what became really clear was that it wasn't necessarily to do with the official charts having relevance. It was to do with the chart per se having relevance in an era of, streaming and discovery and all the rest of it. So I think that was a really interesting kind of immersive piece of work, I think, which was quite kind of eye-opening for those guys, really, in terms of just that reality check, in terms of actually how people are discovering music right now and how one does build that relevancy. So I think that was kind of the main kind of thrust of the work that we did with them.
That's interesting if you're working in it every day, but there's a bit of disconnect or a bit of a perception reality gap in terms of like that, understanding how people are consuming and discovering music.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So NFTs. I'm sure it's way more complicated than we can get through in like a minute on a panel.
I'll do my best. I mean, NFTs, obviously massive buzzword. Everybody's probably sick of hearing about them to a point, but actually not particularly well necessarily understood. Most of us probably aren't engaged with them or buying them, and yet it's talked about as revolutionizing industries like the music industry completely. And when you really dig into it, there's a whole there is a whole rationale for that, because there is this, with the blockchain, there is this massive capability to decentralize. And if you're in the record industry, if you're a record label, you might not like that either. You might be quite intimidated by the prospect of that. But NFTs, I think people think of them as the art at the moment. So it's an image, it's an animation, it might be a song. As you said, the Amazons have now been the first NFT that's recorded into the official album chart.
Yeah.
So they've released an album as an NFT as well as an album. And I think it's a limited edition box set that's the NFT. And that basically what it means is there's an asset of some sort, right? And that has an assigned ownership when you purchase it, right? So I guess it's like buying the rights to a song. And then when somebody listens to that song or plays that song, you're getting a royalty from it potentially. So if I buy that, I could potentially get some money back from that NFT if it's played, or if other people are buying it.
For the consumer, though, if you were to buy an NFT, I think on Twitter you can have it as, like, say, your profile picture, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in Roblox, you can kind of put it physically somewhere in your world. But there is a problem with maybe like visibility, but we see a lot more kind of come through to kind of support the like NFT structure of where you can display your NFT.
Yeah.
And then it will be kind of, accelerated.
So there's two there's two sides to it really, because an NFT could be an image, or it could be a song, or it could be, anything really. What the NFT really is the contract of ownership that says, I've bought this and it belongs to me. And if you use it, maybe I'll get something back from it. Or I think you're right that the way you have it, at the moment. So say if you're thinking of it like a football card, I've bought an NFT of a football card. I need some kind of app or something to show it if I want to show it off, or I need to go and put it in the metaverse and show you it in a gallery or something. You can have a copy of it because you can still take a copy of it. Any digital image you can take a copy of, which is why some people are like, I don't understand what this NFT thing is. I can get this, but it's not really about that. It's about having ownership over the item, or the rights, I guess, the rights to it, if you think about it. So in the sense of it used by musicians, for example, you create an NFT. There's an entrepreneur, angel investor that you might have heard of called Gary Vee, and he's very much encouraged independent artists to create NFTs and to monetize their sales through NFTs rather than going to a record label initially. Because if you sell your album art and say, you give anyone who buys that album art NFT 20% of your royalties, or a certain amount of your royalties, they will essentially fund you to become, if you grow in the music industry, you will essentially be funded by your crowd, your fans. And again, it goes back to that kind of connection with the fans that's going to give you. So when you think about an NFT, yes, you get an asset, but you get some kind of, usually you have a utility with it. You have some kind of thing that it gives the owner. And with a lot of musicians, they're giving away like access to them. So it's connection with the artist in some way. So Post Malone's done a beer pong club NFT, and you get to play beer pong. Post Malone. That's one example. I mean, there's lots of it out there. I'm probably not explaining this very well at all. I'm sorry.
No, I think like, a lot of people in the audience could be starting out or self-released, or, just signed to a label. And I think it's really important to kind of explore all of these things, especially where you can invest in them and then like see a return in the future. And it gives you more independence as you're like negotiating those deals with labels or publishing companies. Obviously, the more informed you are, like the more powerful you are. There is just so much though, right? I work in this every day. I've worked in digital for like over 15 years, like worked for over 20 years in kind of marketing, but it's really hard to know like where and how to prioritize. But obviously we need to like deliver impact with what we're doing, and certainly like artists can't do like 10 things every week. We've talked a lot about burnout, digital burnout. What would you advise in the kind of next year also, if you're working as a record label, producer, self-released artist, if you're thinking about music, where would you place your bets?
I think it was interesting listening to the earlier panel chatting about this as well. I think it's that whole conversation again about, I think as with any marketing or business strategy, it's the why, the essence, it's the it's just trying to be as clear, before you almost start to get bogged down in the activation of the thing. It's the starting to just think more fundamentally, where does that sit in one's marketing or business strategy? I think is definitely the first step. I totally agree with the point that one of the other ladies was making about probably being quite focused around and as well. I mean, again, some of this stuff, particularly from a marketing point of view, is kind of classic marketing in so much as, do some pilots, do some tests, do some experiments. But even with those, I think, still be reasonably scientific about what are you trying to achieve, what do you think might happen, so that when you've actually then done the activation around it, you can then iterate and kind of build out from there. So I think in some respects, it's almost applying some kind of quite traditional marketing pieces of thinking around. And again, I think that's one of, I think, the things that we find, I think, with our clients quite a lot is we're working with, endemics. So we're working with some clients that are completely conversant in Web3 and are really kind of stretching us in terms of our learning. But then equally, when we're working with non-endemics and we're working with brands that don't understand this space at all, I think it is about those baby steps and kind of holding their hand and kind of guiding them into the process. And I think what a piece of work that Val's done is actually, and kind of a summation of everything you've been doing in your career, really, is almost like our own philosophy and model in terms of how we do that, which might be worth you kind of chatting about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to that convergence piece that we're all talking about, and how, all this kind of creative thinking comes together and what the kind of consumers want out at the end of it. I think we have a model that we kind of think about in terms of when we're doing creative now. It isn't just a push creative. It's about, and again, going back to what we were saying before, it's about creativity on the side of the consumer or the audience as well. They want to consume, they want to create, and then there's the community piece as well. So it's kind of a little Venn diagram of that, really, thinking about that in terms of, well, if you're, I mean, it's not necessarily answering your question in terms of what you prioritize, but that's the way we kind of think about things for brands now, because it isn't just about doing one piece of creative and pushing it out. It's like, what's the consumer? How are they going to get involved? How are they going to mess with this? How are they going to play with it? Are they going to make
like co-creation?
Or in, basically a lot of this stuff as well. I guess we're thinking about a younger generation who are very much there in Roblox creating stuff and taking stuff, or in TikTok and taking a song or a video and making it their own in some way. And there's always an element of that in everything that you're doing now. And again, I think the community piece comes through, and that's harking back to the NFTs as well. There's got to be a kind of personal community stake in it, involvement. How can I go into this and actually participate and connect with the artist, for example? So, but coming back to your where to prioritize question, it is tricky at the moment because it's very, very massively talked about, all of this stuff, but it is super early days. I think in 2-3 years' time, we'll all be sitting here and absolutely be expert in NFTs. We'll probably be trading them and thinking about them instead of pensions, all that sort of thing. But it is hard to kind of, it is hard to think like that. And it really does depend who you're trying to tap into, because the younger audiences, the Zs, and probably to some, really the alphas, they're native in those spaces. And if you're kind of trying to appeal to them, you do want to go into the metaverse, our metaverse, not the, because it doesn't exist yet, but you do want to be thinking about doing that. And if you are trying to talk to those audiences, you do want to be playing with that new tech for sure. If you're a different brand with an older demographic, they're not in those spaces yet. And we saw that through Metaverse Fashion Week, as well. That Decentraland audience is older, and it did reasonably well. But couture brands are all in there trying to look cool and make cool stuff, and they certainly did that. But the people interacting with them, there's a disconnect between the audience. You can't expect that you're going to get a return on doing something like that yet, I suppose is what I'm saying. But if you're ready for it in 2-3 years' time, we'll all catch up and we'll all be playing in that space.
I was going to say it's not on the question list, but I'll just point it out that I think still over like 80% of web traffic is still video. And obviously video still plays like a really important part in digital. And with the work that we've done with major record labels over the years, like they've tested a lot, and lo-fi content works better in some cases than highly polished content. But we know that a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves, whether it's an artist whether it's a brand, whether it's a film studio, to create slick, highly polished content. But the reality is that people are consuming like low-fi content from their friends and family, which is really personalized and authentic. And it's something that, you know, do you see that being requested, or do you think it's a miss that people aren't kind of leaning into that more because it feels co-created or it feels UGC?
I think the authenticity thing comes through again and again, doesn't it? And it's definitely really important to that community and the digital community, definitely. And that's why there's a lot of cynicism around things like NFTs, because the brands trying to do, you know, polished stuff, and particularly, I mean, that's not always welcomed, because it's not necessarily authentic, and there's an awful lot of appeal about being human and just being real, isn't it? So
I'm going to share this because it always makes us laugh. Just in terms of some of the content we put out about Aurora, actually, it's that same challenge of, there's kind of part of us sometimes that would be like, how are we going to present ourselves really kind of professionally so we look slick and we're growing and all the rest of it? But then Val's particular kind of hobby is posting stuff of me where I'm just like doing really dumbass things. And that's always the content that actually gets the highest engagement. So I think, I guess it's about both, really.
Yeah.
But I think I think the thread of it again has to be that kind of authentic brand DNA that comes through. Even if you're being a bit more grown up and professional, or you're kind of just messing about a little bit, you know, your brand has to still be the same.
And a lot of artists, a lot of music organizations and brands struggle still to create content for the kind of demands of the digital world that we're in.
Yeah.
Is and should there be, I think so, a bigger opportunity to work with creators? And this came up in the first panel, because, you know, there are amazing people doing illustration, video, art. You know, can you lean in to collaborate with people from other, you know, other talents, and then you reshare their work with your music, you know, rather than have all that pressure to create the assets yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't know if that was a question.
I'm sorry. No, yeah.
Yes, there should be. No, 100%. I mean, it's all what we've been talking about already, and it's quite wonderful, actually, because you do get that fantastic collaborative piece from that, and again, as we were saying earlier, people have different skill sets, and we know that when we've tried to do stuff that doesn't naturally sit within our world, talking about, you know, if you're a musician, you're making, some people are brilliant and they're multidisciplined, obviously.
Yeah.
But some people, you know, you've got a natural strength in different areas. So why not work with somebody who's absolutely brilliant at this, at creating video content, for example?
Yeah, definitely. And especially in Merseyside, that's such like an amazing melting pot of, you know, whether it's gaming, music, technology, developers, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
And, you know, is there a bigger opportunity for people to work together here as well? And obviously events like this help to create visibility around like what's happening and different people leading different parts of, you know, the sector. But I think, you see obviously like collaboration is key to this, and
it's just lovely to see, isn't it? Which is that kind of whole notion of the creator economy, which is that, you know, as much as obviously we've got Meta here today, and, you know, we're seeing all of this innovation coming through from the big brands, I think it's that world that we live in now, which is kind of that duality whereby you've got the creators who with things like the metaverse are now completely empowered. A lot of the rules are changing, a lot of the power base is actually switching back into the artists and giving them so much more scope and empowerment. And I think back to the point about with NFTs, the more they can understand and harness mechanisms like that, you know, I think what an important point, obviously, and everyone I'm sure does know this, but I think the reason why we're super excited about this space is that having worked in this industry for a long time, it genuinely feels like we are in that new kind of tipping point again into, you know, Web3, a real kind of, for me, I see it as this real kind of creative playground where with the metaverse and all of that collaboration happening between brands and creators, it's the commercial opportunity that sits alongside that. We were looking at the latest estimates for all things metaverse. In 3 years' time, the latest estimate is that it's going to be worth $800 billion in just 3 years' time.
Wow.
So whilst, you know, on a bad day, and it's fascinating, isn't it, that the number of times now, and I'm sure everybody's seeing, I mean, for God's sake, stuff like Good Morning Britain reporting on the metaverse and, oh, it's the Wild West and all the rest of it. You know, I think the Wild West in and itself, it, to me, actually suggests opportunity and collaboration and sparking kind of opportunity and innovation. And I think that's the bit which are back to our philosophy as Aurora, of almost being an Avengers Assemble style of agency where we enjoy mashing up all of those different types of creators. I think genuinely it feels so exciting as a space right now because all of those different sectors are truly able to converge now through the metaverse.
And talking of which, obviously, you know, with your role at Nintendo, gaming is massive for music. So we saw Pink Panthers with Roblox for the Brits, as the Brits kind of went full on digital this year.
Yeah.
Epic Games being brought out by Bandcamp, Ariana Grande, in Fortnite. Are you drawing upon your experience in gaming, and is that being asked for more from, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Val and I had a bit of a debate about this, of kind of, you know, almost of the sectors and, you know, the different industries, film, games, music, you know, which have been who's been driving innovation the most. I'm probably a bit biased. I think gaming, I think, has for quite a while now, I think, been quite a darling and a magnet for brands. I remember way back when, I mean, this was a million years ago, but, you know, we had big FMCG brands wanting to kind of try and get into gaming. So I think gaming's been doing it for a while. I think now with the technology, I think it's truly enabling some of those initiatives that, you know, you've just talked about there. Gamification also obviously has permeated into every facet of marketing and business and society anyway. But obviously, I think with all the examples that we talked about before, I think music, I think is incredible in terms of some of the stuff that's happening there. And one of the things that Val and I are just kind of like absorbing constantly is all of the innovation that's happening. And one of the ones that I spotted just a week or so ago, which was, again, just brilliant, was a Coachella. There was, I don't know who this artist is, but it was an electronic dance artist called Flume. And what they did, and which is just brilliant in terms of bringing, you know, immersive experiences from events into the home. Was at Coachella, what they did was when they live streamed it onto YouTube, they created all these like psychedelic massive parrots and but really smart in terms of taking the experience beyond it just being the event itself, but giving something unique and memorable to the truly scalable audience, which are the people watching it at home. So I kind of think gaming for sure, but I think what's really lovely to see is all the other kind of industries all kind of bumping into each other and creating things together.
Yeah. And music is, you know, when you think about it, it always comes back to the song. You know, it's immersive, it's meant to take you away and you know, and escape and kind of really immerse you with that kind of moment. And all these things that we're talking about can seem overwhelming, but really they're meant to complement that whole experience.
Yeah.
And instead of something being audio only, we're now looking at a world where it's audio visual. So yeah, it's super exciting. To close, I've got here Merseyside as a leader in all things music and tech. Obviously, we know it's a really exciting time and space that we've talked about. What's the one big opportunity for like everyone here in the audience, for Merseyside and the whole sector to work together? So like if you were thinking about being an established business, setting up a business, you know, what's your top tip of being successful on a local and national level?
Me to go first.
Come on.
Well, I mean, from our own experience, I think what we love about Liverpool is the fact that it doesn't actually, well, there's two things, well, many things, but in particular in light of us starting the business was, firstly, Liverpool is tremendously globally outward facing, actually. And even though, you know, you've got some big sort of industrial hubs in the UK, we've got London, obviously Manchester, and really kind of leading the way in some of the kind of creative industries. We think, you know, Liverpool is just this, it's got this amazing creative multicultural history and story, and it's this incredible outward-facing. It's a globally famous brand, and we thought, what? There isn't a better place to launch from, to be honest, because wherever you go in the world or whoever you speak to, they know Liverpool for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And that's, that has been a huge advantage, and I think as such, it's got an incredibly creative community of people who come from here, who are proud to be from here, who are here, who've come back to here, and that creates an incredible fire and a talent base.
We don't need to leave.
On.
I shouldn't have left. Need to
Come
come back.
Vanessa, come back. Yeah.
But that's it, isn't it? Like, it's all happening here. Like what we said at the beginning of the conversation, you don't need to leave and go to London. Everything's here.
Yeah.
And, technology has enabled accessibility as well to be able to work.
Yeah.
Be like a global company working out of Liverpool. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much.
So grateful. Thanks for listening as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.